This video we have a question about a plane and it flies from point A to point B, then to point C, and we're going to do section A in this video. I'll do B in the next one, but we have to find the distance that it travels from point C to point A. That's 4 marks for this one. What we want to do is let's sketch it out. And I hope you've noticed by this point that it's a trigonometry question, because you're dealing with sides and angles and it's not a right angled triangle. So you can see that, or you should see that trigonometry comes in useful. That's 180 kilometers and 155. So let's label the sides and angles. So the convention is the side small b is opposite the angle capital B. Small c is opposite angle capital C, and the same for A. We know small c, we know small a, and we want to find small b. That's the distance C to A. So we need more information. Let me explain. Now we don't know any angles at the moment, but that can change. But if we have a look at this one, the idea behind this is if you know two sides and an angle, you can find a side, but we need to know two sides and the angle in between those two sides. That's the catch. So the angle that we know has to be opposite the side that we want to find out. So we want to find small b. We will have to find the angle capital B. But I told you it flies from point A on a bearing of 0.27. So this is A and this is B. Now, if it's on a bearing of 0.27, then this angle, it goes from the north until it reaches the line going towards B, and this angle is 27. We don't need the 0 unless we're specifically talking about a bearing, but we're just looking at the angle. And B going to C, it says it's due east. Because it's due east, what that tells us is that the line B to C will be horizontal. So if we imagined that we continued our north line and we then drew a line that's perpendicular to that, so it's going due east. So due east means it's going on a bearing of 090 with the 0 included. So due east means it's going horizontal, or not 90, as a bearing. So you see it's going due east and we get this right angle. So we can tell that this angle and this one must add to make 90 degrees. So this one has to be 63. And this is the angle that we found is 63. It would be this one. Because if you drew an imaginary line as I did in this one, and we know that's 27, then that must be 63. But again, if we had this imaginary line, I say imaginary because it's not part of the plane's path, it's just a line we are doing to help us with the angles. This should be horizontal, but it's not because it's hard to sketch it on here. Now this angle along to here is 180, so this angle 63 plus the shaded angle is 180, and the shaded angle is 180 minus 63, so that's 117 degrees. And we then have that information, so we can draw this out again. It's not perfectly straight, but it doesn't have to be, it's just a sketch. It's A, B, and C. B, A, and C. And we want to find small b. We'll use small b instead of capital AC. We get the equation in this form. Now, we have to modify this a bit because the letter on the left hand side is the angle we want to find out, and we have to change the A to a B. I know this is so confusing. I was so confused back in school when I did this. I didn't understand it for a long time, and here I am today showing you how to do it, so don't lose hope. But we then want to change the other letters, the B and C, to A and C. Because the two sides on the right hand side refer to the sides that you know. Because we know A and C, we write them instead of B and C, because the equation you're given on the formula sheet assumes that you know B and C and you want to find A. And we replace the angle A with the angle B because the angle B is the angle we know, but on the right hand side it has to be the angle we know. So 2AC cosine of B. So do not copy the equation always as it appears on this, because you might have to modify. So this angle might not always be angle capital A, it's the angle that you know. And it should be the capital letter, i.e. the angle that's opposite the side that you want to find out. Let's plug the values in. So A, small a, which is essentially BC, is 155. all squared. C squared, well, C is AB, and that's 180 squared minus 2 times 155 times 180 times the cosine of the angle capital B is 117. Now make sure you have degrees mode activated and not radians. You're not in higher yet, so you don't have to deal with radians. So 155 squared plus 180 squared is 56,425. I should get a bloopers video by this point. Then we'll do 2 times 155 times 180 times the cosine of 117. So 2 times 155 times 180 times the cosine of 117 is negative 25,332.66, so on. So two negatives make a positive, and we're going to add on 332 point. We'll round this a bit to 670. Let's then add these. I'm doing this in 2 parts, then adding, because you have to pay attention to BODMAS. And sometimes BODMAS, depending on the calculator, some calculators don't like BODMAS, which I think is a pain, because if you spend money on a decent calculator, you should expect it to be able to deal with the order of operations. We take the square root of that and we get, oops, that's the answer to the last question. I'm going up the top right corner because I ran out of space, and that is 285.9330. We're rounding at the moment to 4 decimal places. I will round it again in a second. So we're not told about rounding in the question, so I'm going to round to the nearest kilometre, and I'm going to round up to 286. So to 3 significant figures, I'm going to make the distance AC is 286 kilometres. And we've finished part A. I will do part B in the next video. So best of luck with the studying, and thank you for watching.